All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Club. Again, a sunny day, sunny November day here in Seattle, Washington. I love these days. So I hope you guys are having an absolutely fantastic day out there wherever you are. Today's a good day because we have Garrett with the Garrett companies. They have done 73 projects, 17 states, 16,000 units. Man, that is just a big number in and of itself. So Eric has a ton of wisdom to share with us today. I am super excited to jump into this. Eric, thank you very much for hopping on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'll try to shed as much wisdom as I can, but we'll see how it goes. So
there you go. Yeah. Whatever you got, I'm sure is going to be good. I told you before we got on here, we like to start with stories. So, your story started before 2000, which now just seems like ages ago. So why don't you go back to the beginning? How'd you get started in real estate?
Sure. I'll give you I could talk forever on this topic. I can give you the quick Reader's Digest version, but I think like a lot of folks, my background was such that when it came to real estate, what was sticking to my shoe is really what I had owned in my life. So, the concept of who owned a shopping center or a multifamily project and so on and so forth never even really came into my mind. As I went through college, my background was in social sciences. As a political science pre-law major, minor in history. Was planning on law school. And I was playing pool one day at a local bar in Terre Haute, Indiana. I went to Indiana State University. And the guy I was playing with was this really old guy. When I say old, he's probably like my age now. We're having a great game, just having a beer, talking. And he says, "Hey, you know what? I'm president of a local bank here. Would love to have you come on. We have a real estate department, pretty large regional bank. We'd love to come on and be in our analyst program." And I thought about it, and I wasn't really excited about law school, so I said, "Sure, why not?" So we gave that a try, and it was actually a great education. Learned really very quickly, what the scrutiny that a deal gets in a bank committee meeting, how banks look at deals, what their mindset is, their credit trading program. One of the first projects I worked on was a shopping center deal, and it was in Terre Haute. The buyer was from Louisiana. They were doing a bond issue. It was a fairly complicated deal. The broker of the deal was a gentleman out of Chicago with Marcus and Millichap. And so, working through the whole deal, very complex, a lot of man hours. We get to the closing table, and this is the old days, right? These are the 90s. So we're dispersing checks at a closing table, not just wiring money. And I'm looking at this check, and I realize that he made probably 3 times what I made in a year on one transaction, and I worked my butt off. So I quickly realized that there was a disconnect between what I was doing and what was out there. So I said, "Listen, we need to go grab a drink. I want to talk to you about what you do." And by the time I was all said and done, he said, "Well, guess what? I've got a position open in Chicago. You got to be here in 2 weeks, though. No ifs, ands, or buts." So
not screwing around.
No. So I went in, gave my 2-week notice on a whim, gave it a try, and ended up in Chicago selling apartments, which I can tell you, from the brokerage side of the business, that's a great education. You learn a whole lot about the business. It's actually one of the avenues I'm trying to push my son into as he leaves school and he's trying to figure out his way. I think it's a good training module, good training program. So ended up having a lot of success in the brokerage world very quickly. Just company rookie of the year, sold a lot of projects. One of my largest clients was a developer in Indianapolis who had a huge family history of development construction, but primarily in Indiana. He had done some stuff out of the state, but he had asked me to come on and be his head of development. And I was, once again, very young age. I was only a couple of years into the brokerage side. And, once again, had no real development experience, but I did have the banking experience. I did understand from the brokerage side how to put a deal together, what made up a good deal, what made up a bad deal, and everything in between. So I said, sure, why not? And took a chance. And he took a chance in me. Ultimately, we created a very good system of identifying markets and sites, which I'm sure we'll get into later, and how to identify markets outside of the state of Indiana to go build in. And we ended up doing, 26, 27 projects together. Ended up on the top 15 builders list for national NMHC. So, it was a really good run very quickly. 2007, I was ready to go out on my own and, do my own thing, hang my own shingle.
Perfect timing.
It was a great time. Yes, 2007, 2008-ish. I think that after I broke off and created the other company, I think a week later or 2 weeks later, Bear Stearns collapsed. I mean, it was, anything you can imagine, obviously, happened. But even what I quickly realized is even with my track record and background and, everything that I was able to do prior to 2007 and 8, obviously the world had changed. And I quickly realized I needed to partner with somebody. So I ended up partnering with a retail developer that had some backroom operations and some other things, but obviously weren't doing a whole lot of retail in 2007 and 8. And we forged forward and once again had a great run. We did almost 30 projects, and very good returns. Some of the projects that we started in 7 and 8 were in 2008 ended up being fantastic home run deals. But then once again, call it 2013. I was at a point where I was ready to put it all together. Not only from a construction development management standpoint and create that vertical integration, but I also had a bigger vision on how I wanted the company to be run, what I wanted the culture to be like, and a formula that I knew would work. But I had to be in control of all pieces of it. So created the Garrett companies at that time. And we fine-tuned the game plan quite a bit, but changed things dramatically on the construction side over the years. And today we've done 50 plus projects. I've got 26 more coming out of the ground right now. We've got another 25 or so in the pipeline. So, we're cranking out big numbers.
Yeah, as they say, the rest is history. Yeah, man, I love your story because it seems like it was all very natural, even though you didn't have experience already. You didn't have like a huge background, but you saw the next step, you took it, and it kind of turned out good in the end. Because I feel like so many people, especially in real estate, we don't come from a family of realtors or brokers or, whatever it is. And then we end up in real estate, and the key is just to keep taking those next steps that make sense to where you are right there. It sounds like your career took that route. So sounds awesome. There's a lot of things we can go into here. I was just taking notes while you were talking. One thing that you mentioned is at one point in your career, you realized that you needed to partner. You needed to partner with somebody. What was it about that point at your career that made you have that realization? And how did you go about finding the partner to get?
Well, in that particular case, it was 2008, and the debt markets were turned upside down. There were not a lot of projects being done, and really, it was a combination of things. It was balance sheet. It was not having the backroom operations that a bank is going to want to see. So it really took our collective and combined balance sheets plus their backroom operations and some of their history, combined with my background in multifamily and some of my banking connections to get those deals off the ground in a really difficult time. But we were able to join forces, and I think for the most part we lived in our space, stayed in somewhat of our silos, but we worked well together during those years. And I have no hard feelings with those guys. I just was ready to move on, and I had a different vision. So
yeah, that makes sense. Do you recommend, I mean, for people new just getting into investing, maybe they bought a single family or like a long-term or short-term rental or something like that, Do you suggest people start out by getting their brokerage license, or do you think people should just go into it, start raising money, try to find deals? What's
Yeah,
the route that you suggest people take?
it's a good question. I don't know that there's a right or a wrong answer there. I mean, yeah, you could go get a brokerage license. You could go the route of the brokerage world, understanding really soup to nuts, everything from underwriting a project and understanding how to do a rent comp comparable, for example, all the way up to some pretty large scale projects, and you can get involved in those very quickly in the brokerage route. Whereas if you start on the low end at a large developer and work your way up that route, you're going to be seventh man on the deal team, trying to pick up bits and pieces of information from the lower rung and trying to work your way up. But it seems to me, if you want to be immersed, if you're the type of personality that wants to be immersed into the action right away, the brokerage world does that for you. I also like the private equity piece. I mean, I was talking to my son earlier. We've had discussions, and he's considering going into the real estate world. Hope he does for a lot of selfish reasons. But the brokerage world's one route, private equity is another route. I think those are it's another way to get really close to the action, see the deal, see a lot of different structures, look at 4 or 5 or 6 or even 10 or 12, depending on the company, developers that are out there, how they're doing it, what their business model and thesis is, and then how their their capital stack looks and everything else. I think private equity is a great route too. So if you've got a background or you know somebody in a private equity firm, that would be another route. But if you're coming in just no connections, you don't know anybody, you don't know, I mean, the brokerage world, you're probably, today's world might be a little tough given the current environment in most brokerage shops, but the brokerage route would probably give you the quickest access.
Yeah, I did my first flip in 2014, I think, and I wish that I had 2020 hindsight, 2020, whatever, but I wish I had gone and gotten my broker's license at that point, because it would have allowed me to quit. I was in management consulting, and it would have allowed me to quit that job a lot quicker and just go head first into real estate. But
Mm-hmm.
you live and you learn, and you just take your next step like you did. But I like the advice. I'm going to move us on. We've already talked about, you started developing in multiple markets, 73 projects across 17 states. I've never done development myself. We do mobile home RV parks and self-storage, but we buy properties that need to be repositioned. And I've never done development. I've been afraid of it, mostly because I feel like it all comes down to identifying the site and the market. And you've already said those 2 words earlier today. So what is the key when it comes to making sure that you are, the demand is there in the market that you're entering?
Sure. Well, first, let me dive off on another topic you just brought up really quickly, RV parks, mobile homes. Are you familiar with somebody named Lonnie Scruggs?
I've heard the name, but I don't know the context.
I'll just word of advice: take it if you're into that game. Try to find some of his information. It's kind of old school. I mean, I think the first time I heard him was in the '90s. So, but he
Lonnie
was kind
Scruggs,
of
you said?
yes, yep.
Okay, all right.
But back to the question at hand. So the my thesis was, I from my brokerage days, I understood what, at least at the time, I thought I understood what made up a good apartment market, right? Whether that be quality of life indices, you know, housing affordability gap, number of units coming online, supply and demand, rent growth, job growth, you name it. There was about 25 criteria that went into that analysis. And what I did, I took those 25 criteria, I took every market with 250,000 or more people in it, and I ranked every market based on those criteria. I gave a weighted average to each one to determine, where they were in the cycle. And
was there any logic behind the 250,000 mark, or was that?
I felt like that was the bare minimum size that if you were to build, lease, and stabilize a project, build, lease, stabilize, and sell a project, that you would be able to garner a larger pool of buyers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If you're smaller than that, even at 250, most institutions aren't going to look at it. But I had to find a bottom somewhere, so that that was kind of my spot.
Okay.
And, at the end of the day, I still do that analysis today. It's about 30 different criteria now. But what I learned is it's a very good indicator of future need for apartments. It doesn't really say, okay, yeah, you know what, Memphis, Tennessee needs apartments tomorrow, but it may say Memphis, Tennessee is going to be in need of apartments 4 years from now. Let's call it. So it was always a good target. But what it did though, it just gave me a basis that I could look at and say, okay, there's a lot of demand drivers here. 25 different criteria. These guys are firing on all cylinders in this little city. And we need to go find out why. And then you start digging in really at the macro level. And then we came up with a system of finding very specific sites that met 5 different criteria that it's kind of our proprietary blend of, site criteria, market criteria, and then site criteria. And what we found is if we stick to those very specific criteria, the project returns are dramatically different than if we don't. And I mean, you can miss one criteria and not be at the same project level return. So it's at least, it may not be a causation, but there's definitely a correlation between the rank, the site criteria and the end result. So
yeah, okay. And the main criteria that you're using are, the things that a lot of people think of, like population growth, job growth,
yeah, income growth, housing. Back in the day, housing affordability gap, because there were only a few markets that really had. And what I'm talking about there is the difference between buying a home and a mortgage versus renting, right? And back then, when we started this whole process, there was Chicago, LA, New York, Seattle probably fell into that match where, it was more expensive to buy a home than it was to rent. In today's world, with rates where they are and costs where they are, there's a housing affordability gap in every market across the country. To go buy a home right now, there's a huge gap. So that's not as important right now, but
yeah,
still something to look at.
Do you so let's say a site meets most of your criteria, do you ever look away from a site just because of the local legislation, in terms of, if it's landlord friendly or not? Like, would you not? Oh, you do. Okay.
Yeah, no, there are sites that we've definitely passed on for that reason. There are sites in California that we've backed away from for that reason. There are sites in Illinois. So absolutely. I mean, you got to look at it holistically and just make sure, because you got to look at it too. There's a finite amount of capital, and you're wanting to, if you're going to do 25 projects, you want to, spend that capital in projects that they meet all the criteria, and you're going to get the same return. So why fight the headache of dealing with a market that has something that's not very business friendly?
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, you've grown a pretty big company in, it sounds like a short amount of time. I'm always curious when people, I'm still a really, really small shop, so I'm always curious to hear how people grow their business from the inception. So if you go back to 2013, what were the first few steps that kind of allowed you to scale your business to where you are today?
Well, I guess the good news for me, it's not as if I hadn't been through the process before. Obviously when I started in my first time in development, that was a shop that was doing a lot of building, but we quadrupled their size in a short period of time. Same with, the second go around. So when Garrett Company started, I already had kind of a blueprint and it really had a background to know what the pitfalls were of growing a company that fast. Now we've grown, probably 30% faster. So there's been some challenges there in a very challenging, time for employment and hiring and everything else. But the key to it really is just having the deals. I mean, I think at the end of the day, if you have a system, go all the way back to Trammell Crow. I mean, what Trammell Crow had was a very basic system that was repeatable. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't sexy, but he did it over and over and over and over again. That's all I'm doing. I've got a very repetitive process. You're not going to see me build a high rise in Chicago, even though I could. It just doesn't make sense to me. So while you may never see me, in a major magazine with a high rise next to me, you're also not going to see me bankrupt. So that's the game plan.
Yeah.
We stick to our knitting. So when I came out of this, I knew going in that we had the projects, we had the funding. With those two things, if you have the deals, the money will flow. You'll find the money. And if you have those two things in place, then it's just a matter of scaling an organization. So now, if you've never done it before, you've never been involved in a fast-paced scaling of a company, it's very, very difficult. But it's manageable if you understand the key pieces of the puzzle that you need in place. And you got to be flexible because, an org chart that starts out kind of flat, it grows horizontally so fast and scales down and then grows back out and scales down. It's a challenge, and it's a different environment than stepping into a company that's been there 35 years and they have those policies and procedures in place. They're always changing, always evolving, always fine tuning how you're doing something from an operations standpoint. So
nice. I can only imagine how much balancing it takes to get to that point. So we've run down the clock, unfortunately. I love everything you've said so far. Before we move on, I would be remiss if I didn't ask about your crystal ball. Everybody's saying everything about the economy, where it's going to go, where the interest rates are going to go, where construction costs are going to go. So what do you see happening in the next year?
Well, if history is any indicator, so I've been through .com. I was, the CMBS blow up, 2007, 2008. And I think every time we went through one of those calamities, I assumed that construction costs would go down. So I'd start the next project. I'm thinking, oh, great, I'm going to get a great deal. The subs are going to be scrambling, trying to find jobs, and we're going to be able to get what we want. At the end of the day, I can tell you that cost stayed at least the same if they didn't go up after each one of those events, whether it be .com or 2007, 2008. And I'm kind of seeing the same thing right now. I mean, everybody's expecting they're going to wake up one day and pricing is going to be so low that they're going to be able to start their next deal. I don't think that's the case. All of this is also assuming that we don't reach assuming the Fed doesn't get completely out of control, we end up at 18% rates and we end up at a Great Depression level unemployment rate of 15% or something. Right. So assuming that everybody keeps somewhat in check, rates stay in, they've been coming down a little bit. And they say kind of in this normalized 6 to 7% rate range, which is probably more normal across the historical curve. And we can start making some decisions. I don't think costs are going to come down. I think those will stay flat and then they'll start escalating again. Likewise, given the number of people that are sitting on 3% mortgages, I do not see a lot of people turning over homes. So I see the supply of homes staying low. I see values staying relatively stable, other than the homes that have to be sold because somebody's moving or let go or whatever else. But there are so many people sitting on low rate mortgages right now that they're just sitting there waiting for this to blow over. So I tend to think that we're going to continue to see a lower number of homes being built, a lower number of homes coming to the market, a price tag that's not lowering because construction costs really aren't lowering. So you just continue to see this housing affordability gap grow. And ultimately, I see rents growing for that very reason. There are still households being formed. They'll start doubling up if economic times get more and more difficult, but there's only so much doubling up you can do. And we're already at a deficit for housing. I mean, I know there's some submarkets out there that are a little overbuilt, but that'll be eaten up very quickly given the lack of single family homes options. So my crystal ball tells me that we're going to see flat construction costs, slight increases over the next year. We're going to see rent growth a lot higher than everybody expects. We'll have slow absorption in markets where there's a lot of oversupply. Some key markets in Phoenix, for example, or Vegas, or some of the spots that really had a lot of building. Florida, some of the Florida markets. But those will absorb within a year, and they'll start seeing rent growth soon.
Do you see interest rates staying at about the 6-7%, or do you see that going down, up?
Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at it. I look at it and I think, okay, this isn't the 1980s. The deficit is so high, and the government has borrowed so much money that, and they're basically swapping out 3% debt for 8% or whatever it is now, or 7, whatever the number is, 6. But there's only so much even the federal government can afford. So at some point, there's got to be a fix here to bring rates back in so that the debt service for the Fed is not
unsustainable.
unsustainable. So something's got to happen. They got to balance the budget one way or the other.
Right.
So I don't know. I would think they would come down because of that, but we'll see. We'll see together.
Time will tell. All right, man. That wraps it up for the first section. It is time to go into the quick question round. Are you ready?
Sure.
Let's do it. It starts with education. Give me 2 recommendations. It could be books, documentaries, whatever, movies. 2 recommendations, 1 for general life wisdom, 1 for real estate specific.
Okay, great. I love The Art of the Deal. I think it's a great book. It's a classic. It's an oldie. A book I'm reading right now is a leadership strategy by Jocko Willink.
Oh yeah, no, Jocko Willink.
And actually, Jocko will actually be our keynote speaker at our year-end meeting this year. So I'm kind of excited to have him.
Nice.
So, but
I like his podcast. It's pretty good.
It's pretty good. Yeah, I enjoy it too. So, so I think those are great books. Life. I come from a social science background, so I'm a really boring. I read a lot of books, but really boring stuff, nonfiction. There's a book that was actually written in the 50s, but they've come out with different versions, but it's called The Road to Serfdom by Hayek. He's an economist. But, the essential basis of that book is that, liberty is very seldomly lost in a very quick manner. And so it takes years and years of decay to lose your liberty. That was his economic analysis of what Marxism and socialism were doing to the broader market. So anyway, good read. It's not overly difficult to read. It's a fairly short book. But I think there's a lot of life lessons that apply to today's world as we see all of the world governments getting out of control. So
I will have to pick that one up. The Road to Serfdom, F.A. Hayek. Just pull it up on Amazon. Gonna have to buy that. All right, that leads us to the next question. This is for your younger self. So let's go way back before 2000. Go back to your younger self. Look him in the eye. Give him 1 piece of advice moving forward.
Oh, I think I took my own advice. I took opportunities when they presented themselves, and that was something I set out to do. It was something that was drilled into me by some old coaches, some football coaches that really were inspirational and did a lot to guide me in life. And I was never scared to kind of open the right door when it was presented, and taking some chances and doing some things that most people wouldn't, and it worked out pretty well. So nice. that would be my advice. But I think I took my advice to the best I could. So
well, there you go. That's perfect. Take the steps as they present themselves. Awesome. Moves us to the next one, and this is a good one for you because you've been in so many markets. The U.S. is a big place. There's a lot of opportunity out there. Give me the single metro you're most excited about investing in today.
I still like the Front Range, the Denver Metro. Anything from Fort Collins to Colorado Springs, really. The growth, the enthusiasm in the market. Most of those areas are, mostly for business friendly, depending on the submarket you're in. But we just had a lot of growth in those submarkets, and they continue to turn out for us. So I would say the Front Range.
Cool. Surprisingly, you were the first person to say anywhere in Colorado, even though I know it's a great market. So glad you said it. You heard it here today, guys. Denver, Colorado, go invest. Moves to your next question, and this is about finding the deal. It all starts with getting in contact with the seller. So what is your favorite way to generate leads and find new deals?
Well, we have a all hands on deck approach, but I still prefer finding the seller direct, just because I feel like you're negotiating one-on-one with the person you're trying to do a deal with, and it's always easier to do business with somebody without an intermediary. Having said that, I would still say the lion's share of our deals come through the brokerage community, and we value those relationships too. But like I said, it's easier just to sometimes cut straight to a deal um, if you know the person direct. So
Yep. And do you guys do like mailers, cold calls? How do you?
um,
What's your favorite way to do direct?
once we identify an area we want to be in, we identify all the parcels that are vacant and available or that we think we can reposition, and we'll just get on the GIS and track down the owner and start dialing for dollars.
Yeah, there you go. Old school, never
Yeah,
fails.
that's right.
All right, this that brings us to the second to last question. This is about lessons learned. Not every deal goes the way that we expect it to. Sometimes things turn sideways, but in those deals is the best lessons that we can learn and use in future deals. So, give me a deal that kind of went sideways, and what was the lesson you took from it?
Well, I've never had a loss, which is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
I can actually say that my lowest return is probably on par with a pretty good return. So I can tell you that we've had, as we were trying to settle on what our criteria would be, and we had one piece of the puzzle that wasn't in that criteria, we were able to understand that, hey, this is very important. We got to make sure that every deal moving forward meets this criteria. But I'd say more important than that, and the biggest lesson learned for me is just dealing with people. I'm a very giving person. I'm somewhat of a pleaser by nature. I don't know why, but once I tell somebody I'm going to do something, I want to do it. I want to do it right, and I want to overperform. And it's not just real estate; it's business. It's the world in general. There are a lot of people that, well, some are just certified narcissists, but some take advantage of people that are giving like that, and they will try to maneuver, manipulate, and I can just tell you that I'm over the last 10 years, I've been so selective anytime I do anything with anybody, even a deal. I mean, buying a project from somebody, I tell all my guys, look, if we're negotiating something and it is so hard to get to the finish line of the contract, every deal I've ever done that way, it always ends that way somehow. But it's always a struggle the whole way through.
Yeah.
And you live with these deals, I mean, 3 years. So, it seems like it always starts out bad and it kind of ends. It's okay, but it's still like this battle to get there. So we're very, very selective. And even when I'll turn down a deal if the seller is just being
Annoying.
a jerk, for lack of a better term. If he
There's
doesn't
plenty
want
of
to,
those out there, that's for sure.
yeah. If I feel like it's a person that's trying to get every penny out of the deal at the benefit of him and not trying to really work on something, then it's just not worth my time. Because once again, take Trammell Crow, for example. I mean, he built his entire business on the idea that if you do a deal with somebody, both sides got to make a nickel. If both sides aren't making something, then it's not a fair deal and it's never going to end right. So if you're not making a fair deal, not worth dealing, not worth doing.
I even like to show sellers like my underwriting just to show them like, this is what we're looking at. I just had a guy as a mobile home park here in Washington, and I showed him like, hey, with your asking price, the investors, they could put that money into a CD and get the same return. So it's, we're not asking for something unreasonable. This is just, we do need a return. You need, you've owned it since the 80s, so you're getting a great return. So yeah, I like that. If the seller's being unreasonable, just forget it. Go on to the next one.
And even if you agree on price, I mean, there are so many other little nuances of the contract. If you feel like they're trying to pin you down to the point where it's really just a one-sided, lopsided deal, then yeah. Now that's easier said than done because I understand, I probably took a lot more of those risks early on because I was trying to, grow a book of business. And, I'm at a point now where I can just say no and I don't really care. It doesn't change my life any. So I get both sides of that. But I would still be very, very careful, especially if you're starting in the business, because, one bad deal and it can really take a toll on your real estate career.
Yep, for sure. All right, that leads us to the last question. This is for the listeners. I'm sure people want to reach out, get in contact with you, learn a little bit more about what you guys do out there at the Garrett companies. So what is the best way for people to reach out?
TheGarrettCo.com, and that'll be a great start. And you can search my name, Eric Garrett, on LinkedIn. Would be more than happy to connect with anybody and to answer any other questions. So I will honestly tell you that I get a lot of LinkedIn questions, and I try to get to them as fast as possible. So if it's like a week and I haven't talked to you, it's not me being a jerk. I'm just I haven't gotten to it.
LinkedIn, social media,
but I definitely try. Yes.
Right on. So that is the Garrett Co. 2Rs, 2Ts.com. I will put that link in the show notes. If you all want to reach out, just click a little more in the description. It'll pull down the full description, and there you can find Eric's link. All right, man. That wraps it up. Thank you very much for hopping on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. For everybody who's here with us today, thank you guys for showing up. You are the reason we do this. So if you guys have any questions whatsoever, reach out to me, Gabe at the realestateInvestingClub.com. And if you guys want to support the show, all I ask is you guys give us a like, subscribe, share, all that jazz. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great week. Keep rocking real estate, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.